Welcome to Homeostasis in Humans. Children, let's take a look at the hypothalamus of the brain. Now, the hypothalamus does many things, but two of the most important jobs are 1. To maintain homeostasis, and 2. To control certain hormones. Now, this thing called homeostasis, right, is very important to all animals, including humans. If I had to break this word down, I will get two important parts. I will get the word homeo, right, coming from a Greek word which means standing still or staying the same, and stasis, which means state. So if I have to join them, the meaning would be to remain in the same state. Now, homeostasis is a process that does just that. What does it do? It's a process of maintaining a constant internal environment within the body, right? When I speak about internal environment of our body, I am referring to the blood in the body, the tissue fluid surrounding the cells in the body. All that makes up the internal environment of the body, right? In other words, the cells now are living within this tissue fluid, and whatever must be kept constant, when we speak about keeping it constant, right, must be in the tissue fluid. Important for the body. Why? Because it enables the body to function efficiently, even though there might be changes occurring in the external or internal environment of the body, right? And what can these changes be that might be occurring externally or internally? What is this? It can be changes in temperature. It can be changes in the person's glucose levels, carbon dioxide levels, water levels, salt levels. And all of these changes can actually affect the homeostatic balance of the body. How is homeostasis able to do this? How is it able to keep our internal environment of our body constant despite of any changes happening externally? How is it able to do this? Remember, in our previous lesson, we spoke about the negative feedback mechanism. So, it is the negative feedback mechanisms that operates in our human body to detect any changes or any imbalances that there might be in the internal environment of our bodies. And once the negative feedback mechanism detects these changes, it is able to restore the balance once again. So let's recap before we move on. Homeostasis balances the levels of the factors in an internal environment, right? Why? To maintain homeostasis. But the way the body senses and corrects these changes, what do we call that? Very good. That is called a feedback mechanism. Now, children, let's think about homeostasis in terms of body temperature. The term that we are going to be using is thermoregulation. Thermoregulation is the regulation or the control of body temperature. And thermoregulation in humans is an important aspect of homeostasis. Now, children, most animals maintain or hold their body temperature at a certain level. For humans, what is this level? Yes, it is about 37 degrees Celsius, right? The normal human body temperature is around 37 degrees Celsius. Now, what happens if the body temperature is not kept constant? It's going to affect the functioning of the body, right? The entire functioning of the body will be affected if the temperature is going to now drop far below or even rise far above 37 degrees Celsius. So let's recap. What is temperature regulation? Yes, it is the control of body temperature. Why? To keep it as close to 37 degrees as possible. Why? To enable the body to function normally. Right. Question. Why do we need to maintain a constant body temperature? Why? In grade 10, you learnt about something called enzymes. And you know that enzymes can only work in certain conditions, right? Human enzymes usually work best at the optimum temperature of 37 degrees Celsius, right? Around 36 actually to 37 degrees Celsius. But what happens if the temperature is too high? What will happen to the enzymes? Yes, high temperatures will cause the enzymes to denature. When I speak about denature, I mean that the high temperatures now will actually cause the shape of the enzymes to change. And then what happens is that the enzyme will not be able to work again. And then those enzymes will not be able to catalyze a reaction as it used to before. Let's take an example. If you had to crack an egg, you will notice the egg yolk and the egg white. Remember, the egg white is albumin, and albumin is a protein. And in the egg white, even though we call it egg white, it's actually very transparent. The egg white appears very clear. But if you had to boil an egg, what happens to the egg white that was once clear? Yes, it turned into a hard white egg. What happened to the egg white? Is it still looking clear? No, it now actually looks white. What happened? That protein had become denatured when we boiled it, changing the shape of that egg. Can I now go and reverse that reaction and turn that hard-boiled egg back into that liquid state? No. Why? Because the high temperatures at which I have boiled the egg denatured the enzymes inside the egg itself. We have denatured the protein. So we have changed the shape, the structure of the protein, which is irreversible. We can't go back to normal. However, if you had to take another egg, right? If your mom has just purchased eggs, and if you take it and you put them into the fridge, by putting it in the fridge, what happens? The temperature now decreases, it comes down. Because of the temperature setting in the fridge, the temperature can be very low. And if you go back the next day and take the egg out of the fridge, nothing has changed in this protein. You have just inactivated that protein temporarily. So low temperatures inactivate a protein temporarily. So that is why if we allow our body temperature to go too high, what happens? The enzymes start to denature. And remember, enzymes control every single activity in the body. Remember, during protein synthesis, enzymes controlled transcription. Enzymes controlled translation. When we did DNA replication, enzymes controlled DNA replication. Next question. Which part of the brain regulates or controls body temperature? Let's take a look. Now, we must remember that body temperature is regulated by what? Yes, by the hypothalamus in the brain, as well as, very good, blood vessels and the sweat glands in our skin. Now we are going to take a look at how the body temperature is regulated by the hypothalamus and the skin. Let's begin by focusing on two important definitions: vasoconstriction and vasodilation. Now the word vaso comes from transport, right? And in our body, what plays a role in transport are the blood vessels. If we had to look at the cross-section of a blood vessel, this is what a normal blood vessel will look like. This is known as the lumen. It is the space in which the blood is going to flow. Now, if we talk about vasoconstriction, look at what happens. It becomes much narrower. Can you see that? Okay? You'll find that it becomes constricted. Hence the word vasoconstriction, which means to narrow. And when we speak about vasodilation, look at what happens here. You'll find that this area here now has become much wider. It dilated. Okay? So this is what we need to understand when we speak about vasoconstriction and vasodilation. So if we look at the word vasoconstriction and vasodilation, what does it refer to? Vasoconstriction is the narrowing of the blood vessels or the constriction of the blood vessels, while vasodilation refers to the widening or the dilation of the blood vessels. Now we are going to take a look at what happens during two scenarios. One, when your body temperature is too high during very warm conditions, and what happens to the body during cold conditions when the body temperature is very low. Let's begin. Now, if the temperature becomes too hot, or if your body temperature rises for some reason, or if you are exercising, what happens? Now, in the skin, our heat receptors is going to pick up this stimulus of the temperature being too high and send that message to the hypothalamus of our brain. So the heat receptors via neurons will send the message to the hypothalamus of our brain. What does the hypothalamus now do? It will immediately send a message to the blood vessels in our skin, instructing the blood vessels now to become wider, causing vasodilation to occur. So what happened? The blood vessels leading to the skin capillaries become wider. They dilate, allowing more blood to flow through the skin and more heat to be lost. So what happened when the blood vessels dilated? It opened wider, allowing more blood to rush to the surface of the skin. And if more blood flows to the surface of the skin, this blood will carry with it heat. And when more heat is brought to the surface, more heat will be lost from the surface. So when it's too hot, what happened? The heat receptors in the skin pick this up. They send a message via the neurons to the hypothalamus of the brain. Then the hypothalamus sends a message to the blood vessels in the skin, instructing the skin capillaries now to become wider or to dilate. And when they become wider, more blood is allowed to flow there. And if more blood is flowing there, more heat flows to the surface. And if more heat flows to the surface, more heat will be lost. Let's quickly take a look at ways in which the body loses heat. The body can lose heat through conduction, right? When heat from the body is transferred to cooler objects when touched, right? The body loses heat through evaporation. When sweat starts to evaporate from your skin, cooling it down. Heat can also be lost through radiation, when the body radiates heat, if the body temperature is higher than that of the environment, as well as through convection, when heat is transferred from the body to the air, when that warm air rises and cool air takes its place. So these are the ways in which the body can actually cool down or lose heat. So when we say that more heat is lost through the surface of the skin, how can that happen? It can happen through convection, conduction, evaporation, or radiation. At the same time, because more blood now is rushing to the skin, the sweat glands are also more stimulated now. And when they are stimulated, they release more sweat. But it's not the releasing of the sweat that cools the body, but when the sweat reaches the skin's surface and evaporates. Remember, we mentioned that one of the heat loss mechanisms was evaporation. So when the sweat evaporates from your body, this has a cooling effect on the body. Now let's look at this diagrammatically. We need to look at this diagram here. When it is hot, the blood vessels in the skin, can you see this is narrower and this is wider? The blood vessels dilated and they are coming closer to the surface, and in that way heat can be lost from the surface of the skin. And you can see that when you get hot, you'll find that the person starts to sweat. Now, when temperatures drop or when it's cold, what happens? Now, the opposite will occur. The first thing that would happen is vasoconstriction. But where is that message coming from? So when the temperature drops and it becomes cold, what happens? The cold receptors will pick up this stimulus, right? And send a message via the neurons to the hypothalamus of the brain. Then the hypothalamus of the brain will instruct the blood vessels in the skin to start to constrict or become narrower. And that is called vasoconstriction. So during vasoconstriction, what happens? The blood vessels leading to the skin capillaries become narrower, they constrict, letting less blood flow through the skin and conserving heat in the body. So during that time, less blood is going to the skin. So there will be less sweating. So less heat will be lost because the sweat glands now are less stimulated. So there will be less sweat and therefore there will be no cooling there. In addition to that, something else might happen. The muscles may contract rapidly and then we start to shiver, we start to feel cold. These contractions need energy from respiration and therefore the metabolic rate will go up and this produces body heat. Let's take a look at our diagram again. Looking at vasoconstriction now, what happens? The blood vessels become narrower, constricted. Therefore, less blood goes to the skin. Less heat is lost by the skin. Hope you enjoyed our video. Like and subscribe.